Alrighty, Arjun, we are live. Welcome, everyone. I wanted to thank you for joining me on Just My Stupid Opinion, and I am joined today with Arjun Sinha. And Arjun, why don't you introduce yourself for everyone? I know you've been on the show before, but for anybody who hasn't seen you yet, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm just like a normal, I was a former musician, like I was a musician for 10 years. So like now I've gotten into politics like for the last couple of years or so. And it's got me hooked like a sinker. It's like so damn interesting. So that's, and like the rest is history. Like I'm here now.
Well, it's awesome to have you with us, man, because our first conversation was really insightful. I know I learned a lot talking to you. It was great. And for those who didn't see it, Arjun ended up contacting me after I put an episode about Trudeau in India. And he ended up telling us all about his side of the story from India, about how they felt about Trudeau's visit. So for anyone who hasn't seen that, you can go ahead and check that out. It's just underneath my videos. But so we're still going to start off today. We just want to do a couple updates with what's ended up happening with the Jaspal Atwal event. Because I know from my side, ever since Trudeau came back, they've been trying to downplay what ended up happening. And then they started actually making a conspiracy that it was the Indian government that was trying to, that ended up putting Jaspal Atwal there, trying to make it seem like he was the Indians were trying to sabotage Trudeau. However, since there's been so many backtracks by our liberal government that it's very clear that it was their screw up and they're just trying to cover themselves up. I mean, they've been refusing to send Daniel Jean is the prime minister's assistant who has been said that gave that invitation, or at least who has been the big defender of saying it was the Indian government. And what ended up happening actually just this past week was that we there was a motion put forward by our conservative government in order to get Daniel Jean to come and speak to Parliament and answer some questions in front of a committee, and that got shot down by the Liberal government. So what the Conservatives ended up doing is they forced a marathon vote. There was a spending estimate, the spending bill estimates that were coming up in Parliament the very next day, and they put some 260 motions of confidence forward on this bill, which took a total of 20 hours of voting in the House of Commons. That ended up being last Thursday overnight all the way to Friday till like 2 or 3 in the afternoon. But the Liberals to this day are still, despite that, sticking strong with saying that they did not invite Jaspal Atwal. Now, that's some of the updates from our side. What about from in India? What new information has come to light concerning this event with Trudeau?
See, like I went back, I have dug into the intelligence aspect of it a little bit, and just like a short note on this is like the Indian government is not directly contradicting or confronting Trudeau, except for the statement saying that there is a baseless charge. Because like for the Indian government, it Trudeau's these allegations made by Trudeau don't they don't he has no evidence to back it up. He holds no water because Modi is a well-known world leader. Like other world leaders know him, so everybody knows what's going on here. So the fact of the matter is, India is not pushing hard on trying to corner Trudeau or anything in this matter, except for the fact they have issued the usual sort of like deniability as such, like we are not involved as such. So the other point is that which I was trying to dig up was, and I make this as a statement, like as a person from viewing from outside in, I make this with sort of, it's not my intention to hurt Canadian people or anything, but what I sort of dug up was like these are very strong rumors in the background that like initially when Daniel Jean came to meet with the National Security Advisor of India a week before Trudeau's trip. I said that he blew it off. The last I knew was he blew it off, but actually that wasn't true. Apparently, he flat out refused to sort of condemn Khalistani terror and any form of fundamentalist terror. And because of that, and because that happened, the Indian government backed off and became very diplomatically very chilled because that was not in line with the agenda that the Prime Minister was expecting, the Prime Minister of India was expecting. Because his agenda is condemn terror all over the world. He's trying to build a platform against fundamentalist terror of any kind. So, but then when he got honored by the media, international and Indian, about this Jaspal Adwal thing and the Khalistan thing, he tried to blow it off like as much as possible. But it is, and here is the sensitive bit, which is partly my reading of the situation and partly some things that I've been hearing, means behind the scenes, that that because in that 1 week he suddenly, even when he gave the press conference regarding the Jaspal Adwal thing, he never really condemned terror in that thing. Until that point, his stance was that he was not condemning terror. But overnight, he changed his position and he signed all those declarations, the security declarations condemning Khalistani terror, religious extremism, and all that, which got me interested in it. How come he changed his position in like 24 hours? Because he had not said anything prior to that. Then I came to know, apparently, and here I stress that Trudeau is not representative of Canadian people, and I stress this because this is a sensitive matter, and I say this with no malice. Apparently, it was communicated to to Trudeau's contingent that if Prime Minister Trudeau did not sign those, if he did not sign them, Prime Minister Modi might not be here. It was communicated in that manner to him. So it means, like, I don't know how they put it up, how might they have put it across to him, but this is what I hear. This is basically this fits in with sort of the thing that he changed his position in like 24 to 36 hours. Like it was a very short period in which, and he got him to sign the agreements before he met. He got Trudeau, Prime Minister Trudeau, to sign the agreements before he met, and yeah. So that's the kind of thing.
Well, I completely understand why he would make Trudeau sign that first. I mean, Trudeau is not exactly trustworthy when it comes to deals. So India's got to protect its own back before anything else. I completely understand that. Trudeau's been a terrible representation of Canada to India. Actually, I argue that Andrew Scheer, the leader of the Conservative Party, has been doing a much better job at trying to repair the damages that have happened between Canada and India. I know that recently he went to London and he was looking to he was trying to reopen trade negotiations with India, try and get a better free trade on the table because of what ended up happening with Trudeau. And he wants stronger relationships with India. So I think Scheer winning the upcoming election would be the best thing that could happen for our ties between the two between our two countries. Because the other thing is, too, is we got Andrew Scheer, and then on the other side, if the only other person who really has another chance of winning would be Jagmeet Singh. And Jagmeet Singh himself has been just as bad at calling out terrorist extremism, and he's been defensive of the Khalistani movement and other extremist movements as well. I know he refused for a long time, he refused to disavow the Air India bombing from 1982. So I don't really, if Trudeau was to get voted back in office, or that Jagmeet Singh ended to get voted back in office, that's about the worst thing that could happen for relationships between our two countries. However, as it stands between the polls, Andrew Scheer has the biggest advantage. If we were to go to election today, he would walk away, I think, with a majority government if the polls are, if I remember reading them correctly. So there's hope there, my friend.
See, I've been following the Michelle Rempel, Candice Bergen, Pierre Poilievre. I don't know how to pronounce his surname. That guy, Andrew Scheer himself. I've been following these guys' YouTube channels, and I've been Erin O'Toole. These guys have been there is a kind of excitement in the PC party right now, which I did not see previously. For as long as I followed the PC party, I've been going into videos going back a couple of years, 2-3 years. There is a kind of excitement in the PC party right now, which I have not seen. It's so much so that I just saw a video today which Candice Bergen and Michelle Rempel uploaded. Like they appeared on this video, on Michelle Rempel's channel, and they were like basically giggling like schoolgirls. Basically, they were so excited about how they were like talking about Ralph Goodale, the public safety minister, and they were talking about how he was cornered, and again he was coming out, doubling and tripling down on this conspiracy theory. But yeah, there is a kind of excitement in the PC party which I'm seeing now, which is good for morale, at least amongst conservatives. Yeah.
Absolutely, because I'm thinking back to our old leader for the Conservative Party, which was Stephen Harper, and I'll admit that I didn't appreciate Stephen Harper when he was in office. I didn't like him very much, but now that he's gone, I saw some of the things that he tried to do and how he was actually a benefit to our country, especially economically, I'd say. But it definitely was at that time a very stereotypical conservative party, old men and later generation women, like old women and stuff. That was what it was made out for. But yeah, over the last few years, it's really branched out and it's starting to encompass a lot of younger people. I've also seen it myself online, is that as I've started to move more towards the Conservative Party, and I've also noticed a lot of young people that are getting away from the left, going more towards the right. And yeah, there is like an electricity in the air, especially at these rallies, because I've been paying attention to the rallies that are getting thrown by liberals, the New Democratic Party, and then the conservatives. And the conservatives not only have the best turnout, but it's almost like a concert. People are there, they're cheering, they're waving, if not flags, they got some sort of banners or stuff. They're excited to be there. And then you go and watch one of the other ones, and it's maybe a dozen, 2 dozen people just sitting down in some quiet restaurant as like the MP gives their speech or whatever. So it's completely, yeah, you're absolutely right. It is completely different. And I actually think is because I think Trudeau, how bad he's been, has woken a lot of Canadians up to what's the problems with the left. And I think one of the biggest ways he's done this is because he's thrown our citizens to the side in favor for immigrants. I would say was a big one, but more specifically, we're more talking about the Muslim immigrants that were coming in, and he's showing a lot of favor to these Muslims, and he likes to pretend like Canada's a very racist country towards these people. And we have our problems. Every country has its problems, but Trudeau has definitely started to align himself with this form of soft Islamization, which is he's allowing them come in and he wants to change the laws. He wants to change the cultures to be more accommodating to these people. So that's, I think, is why a lot of Canadians are starting to flip from the left and going towards the right. I'm sure you're probably seeing something similar in your country.
Yeah. So, but before I come to my country, the fact is, I wanted to say something about how Trudeau is letting people infiltrate his country. Like, for example, let me talk about the Chinese infiltration into the Canadian real estate market. Right now, the National Security Advisor before Daniel Jean. Okay, right now his name escapes me. I apologize. The thing is, the National Security Advisor before Daniel Jean, he was a Liberal Party guy. He was appointed by the Liberal, he was a Liberal appointee basically. When the Chinese started buying up assets in Canada, like for example Norsat, there was a Norsat deal and all, which China bought, which a Chinese company bought, which had links to the Chinese government, and there were real estate left, right, and center. Chinese entities were buying up these real estate things. This former National Security Advisor, he in writing, repeatedly he told Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, that don't allow this to happen. So Trudeau ignored him and eventually marginalized him. Like he just marginalized him, and this guy resigned on his own, saying that I cannot, in good conscience, carry on. If you can look up his name, like the guy before Daniel Jean, that's the guy. So
you want the National Security Advisor?
Yeah. The intelligence, yeah.
Intelligence security.
So continuing from there, yeah. So then he appointed Daniel Jean. Now, there was a consensus in the Canadian intelligence community saying that Daniel Jean has no security experience. He is not the good guy. He's just a bureaucrat. He has had no experience with security. He has no experience with security policy, with security relationships, with intelligence relationships, with intelligence. He has no knowledge about the intelligence field at all. So at that Trudeau had made this peculiar comment, which I found peculiar in the like and mind-boggling. Trudeau said that yeah, but what Daniel Jean lacks in experience, he more than makes up in terms of administrative capability. Which as for the position of a national security advisor, I don't think his main job is administration. His main job is public safety, right?
Oh man, I can't believe Trudeau actually said that. I think I missed that quote actually. I can't say that I heard him say that. I must have missed it somewhere in the news, but yeah, like when you have a national security advisor, the whole point is national security. You don't give a crap about administration. When we're talking the government too, they have plenty of people working in administration. They don't need another person working in administration. Yeah, and considering how the state of how the world can be these days, I mean, maybe not so much over 2018, but going back through 2015, 2016, 2017, we were seeing a lot more increase of global terrorist attacks that were going on. So you would like to have a national security advisor in place who's actually keeping you safe. And just quickly wanted to touch again, you were just mentioning about China when they were starting to buy up assets. The other thing that concerns me when we're discussing China doing that is the fact that China is a communist country. The businesses are pretty much an extension of the government. It is an extension of Chinese and communist influence. So whenever they're doing this and they're starting to dump, whether that be lumber or the most recent one we're hearing about is metal or aluminum and steel right now. When it comes to this is all just an effort for the Chinese to buy influence in North America. And they're focusing on Canada right now because, especially with Trudeau in office, it's very easy to influence our country. I hate to say it, but right now it is very easy to influence us.
Yeah, so coming back to Daniel G, after he got appointed, after the previous national security advisor was sidelined, and Daniel G took office, he cleared all those Chinese, the pending Chinese tenders, and he just pushed them. In fact, he pushed them through fast. And throughout, Canadian intelligence and CSIS and RCMP and all these guys were sending alarm bells that don't allow the Chinese to come in. But he just bulldoze those Chinese tenders through. So as far as security is concerned, I don't know. Considering the last time you told me that Trudeau had said things like his model for that he appreciates dictatorships. So yeah, connecting to that, there is something going on. Yeah.
And I actually think this is why he seems so favorable to Islam, because Islam always it's very left leaning in their politics for the way that their countries are run. It's very left leaning and requires a lot of government oversight. And I think this is one of the reasons that Trudeau actually likes the culture and he wants to influence it more, is because as a person who has, again, shown his support for dictatorships, and I think his quote was when he was saying is that China's basic dictatorship allows them to get things done more efficiently. It is concerning because I can see that being what he would like to do now as I watch sort of his actions, and he's promised the most transparent government in our history, which he has not delivered on at all. He's actually been the least transparent in all of them. So this is why I actually believe that he started to ally himself with Islam a lot more, because this seems to be a tactic with the left, is they're willing to forego all of the bad stuff that comes from Islam, all the bad values or what's in the Quran or the Hadith. They'll completely forego this in order to push their agenda because it benefits them when they want to talk about discrimination and equality. So I think this is why he's really done this. I think it's more about the power move than anything else. I don't think he really cares, other than it's a means to an end for him.
Yeah, of course. See, identity politics is the bread and butter of the left. Right. So because like in that last podcast with Analytical Chick and Bold Like a Leopard. We were discussing that about postmodernism and all that came up. So postmodernism is the baby of the academic left during its long march through the institutions, right? So postmodernism gave birth to, which is Marxism in with new clothes, basically. That's Marxism with new clothes. So with from there, see, modernism influenced Pierre Trudeau a lot. Like Pierre Trudeau, millionaire guy. His dad was an industrialist. He was a Marxist, right? Because of this, because his entire academic life was spent in left-leaning, activities, like political activities, and he was an out-and-out ideologue. Now, Trudeau is not like his father. He's not an ideologue as such. He's more dangerous than his father in that sense that Trudeau is not rooted to any particular thing. He's not ideologically rooted to any particular thing. He's like an empty bag which you can like put anything into it and seal it and then watch it flourish. It's like that. But means ideologically and politically speaking. So Trudeau has like basically cobbled together a sort of coalition of ideas, so to speak, from the left, from Islam, from this minority identity politics business. He's cobbled together a bunch of things and he's running with that. It's like one of those. It's like his blankie, so to speak. Like I don't have a better sort of. I don't have a better simile for that.
No, absolutely. That's a great way to describe it, is how it's like his blankie. Because if you, I don't know if you've ever watched the question periods that happen in our parliament, but that's exactly what Trudeau does with these ideas. Is he's asked a question, he never answers the question, but he uses these ideas and this divisiveness as a defense. I mean, one of his main counters is that somebody will ask him a question about something, and then he'll make some reference to our previous government about how they acted this way. And, we're doing this because we're doing it for all Canadians. It is his blankie. He uses it completely as a defense. And it's gotten so transparent these days that I honestly can't bear it anymore. Sometimes watching question period is just horrendous for me just because he can't answer a damn question. But yeah, no, absolutely. When you said that it's like his blankie, that is a perfect example for it. And
yeah, so yeah, go ahead, finish. Finish.
Oh, nothing. I was just going to say that. Yeah, well, I remember you were talking about how postmodernism and Islam is kind of together. Not too long ago, I released a video called the Marxist Plan, which was just talking about how the whole plan of these postmodernists, these Marxists, is to how they influence, they get themselves into positions of power, and then they start changing from the inside out. And this also seems to be, as I've noticed, our parliament is to be what is going on with some of these Islamic ideas, because we have people inside our parliament right now who have held these extremist beliefs. I know one in particular I can think of is Iqra Khalid, who, when she was in college, she was I don't think it was the Muslim Brotherhood, but it was some Muslim group where it was advocating for things such as like husbands should be allowed to beat their wives, women should cover up, yada, yada, yada. Extremist ideas, but she was advocating for this, and now she's in a position of power in our parliament.
Iqra Khalid was, I think, the organization she was part of was, I think, Muslim Students Association.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, I think it was the Muslim Student Association.
Which is the student wing. It is the student wing, basically, of the Muslim Brotherhood on US and Canadian campuses.
So it might as well be the Muslim Brotherhood that she's associated with, then, eh?
Yeah. If you follow, have you heard of this activist and lecturer called David Horowitz?
Oh yeah, David Horowitz. Yeah.
Yeah, that guy. He has given lecture after lecture where he has confronted Muslim Students Association members, where he has even gone so far as to say that Muslim Brotherhood, when he said, yeah, when he confronted this Muslim Students Association, this representative, this girl wearing hijab and like one of those terrorist neckerchiefs and all that, like all those frilly stuff of that Muslim women wear. And there he tells this girl that Hassan Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah, said that let the Jews gather in Israel so that it will be easier for us to slaughter them. Let them collect in one place and it will be easier for us to slaughter them. So he outright asked this girl that, do you agree or do you condemn it? This girl said, I agree with Hassan Nasrallah, completely exposing Muslim Brotherhood's that link to Muslim Brotherhood and their sympathies for the Muslim Brotherhood. This is an actual example where he has connected Muslim Students Association to the Muslim Brotherhood and Hassan Nasrallah, the Hezbollah guy.
Actually, I do remember seeing that video when he asked the woman that, and that for me was one of, I was already starting to realize some of the dangers that was associated with Islam, but that for me was just an eye-opener when I saw this girl who looked like an average college-day student that was refusing to disavow the slaughter of every single Jew in Israel, actually every single one in the world. It was just because they were saying they want all the Jews to gather in Israel so that way they could slaughter them. And yeah, that was my eye-opening. I couldn't believe that this woman was advocating for a genocide such as that. And then I remember doing a little more research, and back during World War II, I actually found out that when the Nazis were, when they were dominating Europe before 1944, it happened in D-Day, before everything turned, they were actually in talks with a few countries in the Middle East about bringing the Holocaust there, about setting up concentration camps there as well to bring in the Jews and everything. And that was another eye-opening for me. I couldn't believe that they were willing to go to that extent in order to do something like that, you know? And then we can just watch as ever since 2015, and we're seeing we saw lots of ever since the migrant crisis, anti-Semitism inside of the inside Europe has just grown significantly. There was an article the other day that was saying, should the Jews leave Europe?
My God. Wow. I mean, really? Like the Hitler actually was planning that? Like to bring the concentration camps to the Middle East?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, no, it was crazy. I couldn't believe it.
Like, I mean, it's not surprising, but it's like birds of a feather after all. But the fact of the matter is, yeah, those guys are committed. Those guys are committed. I mean, wow. Yeah, that's quite a that's like I have to look that up.
Oh, by the way, yeah, and that article that I said, like about the one should the Jews leave Europe, that came out of the Atlantic. Like it wasn't like any extremist. It wasn't any extremist. It wasn't anything like the Daily Storm or anything. And actually, now I'm looking at the date. It was actually a couple of years ago. I thought it only came out the other day. I only saw it the other day. But now I'm looking at it. It did come back from a couple of years ago. But still, it's a mainstream article that's now talking about should the Jews leave Europe because they feel like they're in such danger now, all of a sudden.
Like, have they written it like as in that the Jews actually should leave Europe or they should leave for their own safety?
It was more talking about they should leave for their own safety. It wasn't telling them about kicking them out, but it was saying like things are getting bad in Europe. Maybe they should leave for their own safety, sort of thing. Like a lot of Jews apparently are now starting to feel very nervous because, at least from their point of view, they're starting to feel like it's reminiscent to what was going on in the 30s. You know, the anti-Semitism is rising again. So they're worried about what that might lead to, I think. So that was what it was talking about. Yeah, so pretty much saying how they felt that they were not safe anymore in Europe.
Yeah, but isn't it funny? Like, say for example, the liberals, they say that Holocaust was bad, Nazis are bad, white supremacy is bad. But then they turn around and they count out guys who are anti-Semites, who are supremacists in their own way. Like the Arabs are absolute racial supremacists. Arabs believe in their own supremacy over all others, over humanity. So yeah, that is a point worth discussing. Actually, like in society should discuss that point. That how come the left guys are sort of kowtowing to these guys? Like that Farah Khan guy you guys were talking about the other day, right? That guy, the Nation of Islam guy, right? Now let me tell you something about Nation of Islam, right? Nation of Islam, okay, sounds in principle very similar to what in Southeast Asia and what in the Middle East is called caliphate, right? Nation of Islam is basically that caliphate model. So the anti-Semitism that is coming out of Farrakhan and all these guys is not at all surprising, because these guys are also basically caliphate is what another model of ISIS. During Indian independence, there was this Muslim group in our country called Khilafat, who got their model from the Turks, which is an old prototype of ISIS. It's an old prototype of the caliphate. It was chucked out back then. Now and today, it returned as ISIS. So that's the thing. There's a fundamental strain in this kind of thinking, and the liberals and the left is absolutely hand in glove supporting these guys. Hand in glove. Like, for example, I was watching like that Tariq Fateh video we were discussing earlier, that he says in that, right, talking about Canadian security, he says in that there was this MP, there was this member of parliament who used to, when he used to travel, he had this driver in his car who used to chauffeur him. And he was a volunteer. He was a Pakistani Muslim guy, right? He didn't name the MP, but this Pakistani Muslim guy was apparently an ISI guy. He was member of the Pakistani intelligence community.
And he made his way into government, you were saying?
No, he was the driver for this member of parliament who had no idea that this guy was an ISI guy. And there are many ISI generals today who are millionaires living in Canada. Okay, Mississauga has apparently this is what I get from Tariq Fateh, that there are over 200 active ISI operatives in Mississauga. Just in Mississauga.
Holy crap!
So the Canadian security establishment is I don't know. I don't know what's happening.
They're failing. They are failing so hard right now. Like the one thing that apparently our intelligence agency prides itself on, which I don't believe, is they say that they're less partisan politics than in the United States, because it seems like a lot of the intelligence agencies are very partisan down there. And our Canadian intelligence agencies, such as RCMP and CSIS, like our top federal departments, they pride themselves on being less partisan, but it seems clear to me that they are, because they don't do their jobs properly. We're hearing, again, you just said right now, 200 ISI operators in Mississauga alone. That shouldn't, if we know this, then it should not be hard for them to figure that out. And as far as I know, it's not like Canada has a great relationship with Pakistan. You know, it's not like we ever have great trade or some sort of it's not like it is with you in India. You know, we have trades, we have agreements for democracy, we have to spread democracy, we've got agreements for fighting counterterrorism together. None of that is what we have with Pakistan. In fact, Pakistan many times has funded terrorism. So I don't believe that at all.
It is the mothership of terror. Now see, about this ISI thing, apparently Toronto is their North American headquarters for ISI. It is spoken of like that. So and it doesn't have much of a Pakistani population. It is very close to seats of power. These guys, they congregate around the government. They go and lobby governments. They go and like set honey traps, and they get into those they get compromising photographs, and they get leverage on these guys, and then they try to get people like Ikra Khalid and all these people to sort of get into parliament. Then they start doing these things. They start lobbying. They start getting M103 bill. They support things like they support people who are trying to get bills like the M103 bill, C16 bill, things like that, right? So the security. See, the security of a nation should be paramount, and for the Canadian intelligence, one thing I would like to say is an intelligence should be partisan towards their own country. It should be partisan. It should not be non-partisan. Like that is their purpose. Their purpose is to get leverage on other countries, right? To get and other security things, that to maintain public safety and security. That is their job. That is why they are there. So to say that we are non-partisan politically, which is a good thing. Institutionally, you should be non-partisan, but the interests should be partisan. interest of an intelligence agency should be partisan, and it should be directed towards getting to the root of these problems. Now, the fact of the matter is, RCMP, for example, all these guys, right? For example, all mosques in Canada, okay, when they lead their Friday prayers, they say, give us victory over the kafirs, the non-believers and the infidels. Okay, they lead their prayer before they sit down. With that preamble, they sit down for the morning namaz, right? Every Friday, all mosques across Canada. Now, the fact of the matter is, then these very guys, they hold big feasts during Ramadan, and they have exotic festival food and dance and all that cultural gatherings and all that. And they invite all these RCMP and CSIS guys, or not CSIS, I would say RCMP and police and all these public safety guys, and they invite them to these events. These guys go there, happily have food, and then go back, not realizing what is happening. This is basically, they're just sort of telling you, oh, have nice food, oh, see nice women dancing, this, that, oh, so let's have a fun time, oh, there's nothing going on here, please go back. It's all fine over here. So it's a classic misdirection which is happening, and in fact, it's this Tarifata talks about this in that video that I sent you, that long one. So see that 1 hour plus video, and it's in that.
Okay, so I'll have to go check out that one. I'll check out the long one, the hour-long video to do that. Yeah, I just I was doing some schoolwork over the last couple of days, so I was watching them as I could, but I didn't. The long one, the hour one, was a little too much for me before I could jump on the stream with you. So I'll have to go back and check that out for sure. But yeah, like you were talking about, one thing about I've noticed too is that when it comes to something like Islam, it is a Arab supremacy group, because you were talking about Arab supremacy. And one thing I've noticed too, as I've done more research into it, is that even though when it comes to Muslims, Arab Muslims are considered a higher social standing than any non-Arab Muslims. And in fact, any non-Arab Muslims who considered themselves to be at equal standing as an Arab Muslim is actually committing a sin. So that right there in and of itself helps prove that it is a supremacy movement. Now I understand I think for not there are for the less involved Muslims, that's what I don't know if that's what I call them, but I got some friends who that are call themselves Muslim, but it's not like they really go to mosque, they don't pray or anything like that. I know for them it's all about religion, that's all the only thing about it. I know it has nothing to do with Arab supremacy, but I've noticed that whenever it comes from areas where the Islam is strictly enforced, where it's most of the population is Muslim, where it's extreme, that is where we're starting to see these bad values coming out of. And even, I don't know if this plays any factor in anything, but even these couple of friends of mine that I think about, they're not even from the Middle East Muslims. They're from Albania, which is the Balkan Islands, right above Greece or something like that. So it could be different values because of that. But all in all, when it comes to Islam, we're talking, it is an Arab supremacy group.
See, Islam coming out of Arabia is Arab supremacy. Not all Islam is like that. There is Sufi Islam, which is very peaceful. There are Vietnamese Muslims who live together with the old Vietnamese Hindus over there, and they are more sort of very peaceful. You won't even recognize what form of that is. They are worshipping Islam at all, or they're following Islam at all, because it is so different and unique and very peaceful. So there are, and on top of there are various strains of Islam. There is the Ahmadiyas, there are the Ismailis, there are the Dawoodi Bohras, there are the Shias, there are the Sunnis. Amongst the Sunnis, there are Wahhabis, Salafis, Deobandis, Barelvis, a bunch of Islamic sects within Islam. So Islam, now coming to the Shia Sunni thing, the Shias and the Sunnis are basically two groups of Islam which form on the difference from a difference of opinion, where some Islamic scholars who believed in the the brute force superiority, the warlord version of Muhammad, they said, we want to conquer. We want to spread through conquest. We believe in superiority of by force. And the Shia said, we believe superiority by morals, moral superiority, and soft power superiority. So then, and then that eternal Shia-Sunni conflict sort of started. Now you can say, now the Sufi Islam that we can see, Sufi Islam came into being when Islam came into contact with Hinduism. They saw the Hindu, and some of the greatest saints in Islam have been Sufi saints, historically, because they came into contact with Hindu values, and they sort of that part of Islam morphed, and they became Sufis, and they are one of the most sort of persecuted amongst the Muslims themselves. Within, like, Muslim on Muslim crime sort of thing, they're the most persecuted. After that are the Shias. The Sunnis, who believe in expansion through conquest and force, those guys means they are the majority. So currently they are the ones who are deciding the direction Islam is taking. Like 1.7 billion adherents, 90% of those, or yeah, about 90% of those are Sunnis. Okay. Now amongst Sunnis there are Ismailis, Ahmadiyas. Interesting part. Interesting fact. Trudeau's billionaire friend, the Aga Khan, he's an Ismaili, right? He is the Aga Khan the fourth. His grandfather was Aga Khan the third. Now, his grandfather was instrumental in coming up with the two-nation theory, which is the basis of modern-day Pakistan. That Hindus and Muslims cannot live together. The two-nation theory. So the current Aga Khan's grandfather came up with that theory in partnership with Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the first Prime Minister of Pakistan. So there is a very interesting history. For example, the Prophet, when he died, his family was being hounded by the Umayyads. The Umayyad dynasty, which was responsible for expanding Islam through conquest by attacking Spain, Europe, all these places, right, and Africa. So the Umayyads were hunting the Prophet's family, and the Prophet's family came and hid in India, where the Hindus gave them refuge. And today, for example, the Umayyad, the king who was hunting for them, Muhammad bin Qasim, is actually revered in Pakistan as a great conqueror. So it's a very confused state of affairs in the Islamic world right now, that each is trying to outdo the other by saying, I am more Muslim than you. And this is the foundation of the chaos which now they are bringing to the West with all this immigration business. They're bringing this chaos from, see, if they did not have oil, they would be one of the most inconsequential parts of Earth.
Well, actually, go ahead.
Nobody would care who they were. They would be like Africa. Like Africa still has great value to society because those guys are sitting on 30% of the world's resources. But if these guys did not have oil, there would be no sort of, people would really think of the Arabs at all. So these guys are bringing that kind of chaos, that because 90% of the Arab world is suffering from illiteracy, is suffering from poverty, misery, and the sheikhs are making money with the oil. So these guys are coming from some of the worst parts of Earth, and they're bringing that chaos into the Western world. And the security agencies are not countering it effectively, at least in Canada.
No, absolutely. They're not doing anything about it. And actually, the other thing when we're talking about the oil in the Arab world is the one thing about that, well, a couple things about that, is the first thing is, despite the fact that the Arab world has so much oil, they've done next to nothing to build themselves up because of it. I don't know where exactly that money's gone to, except for maybe their rich kings and everybody in charge. But all in all, if the oil was to dry up tomorrow, there would be nothing in the Arab world to keep going. By rights, if they were to have properly invested the money that they had made from their oil, they actually, I could think, be technologically at least not, maybe not on par, but they could probably be not far behind America, like Saudi Arabia could have been if they wanted to. But we look at the state of it, and if the oil was to dry up now, there would be nothing there to sustain their economy. On top of that, in one of the videos I remember that you sent me, Tariq Fatah, right? That's the name? Tariq Fatah?
Yeah.
Yeah, Tariq Fatah, he was talking about how with that oil, what they ended up doing is they then began funding mosques all over the Western world. And part of the reason for this was in order to spread the influence. You get the mosques over there, you get people going, you get the messages out. And we can see the video clips from the mosques these days about what sort of things they're preaching. And along with Arab supremacy, it does preach things such as the roles of women in Islam, the roles of like how these people should go out and, you know, spread the word of Islam. So it is quite dangerous in when like with what they've done. They have tried to spread their influence all across the Western world through whatever money they could make. It's like, it really seems to me like they're more concerned with making sure that the rest of the world converts to Islam than anything else. Like that seems to be the end goal for a lot of these countries or these Muslims organizations.
Now you would think that like the kind of values our societies have, like if you like point to these guys and say, oh, these things are wrong in your religion, back off. Okay, you guys are horrible guys. This, that. You think that would shame a person, like or making them feel bad and backing off and like trying to sort of change the way they are, right? Like if you tell a normal person that you are this, you are that, he would actually kind of think and say that yes, I am. Let me just rethink like what I perceive about myself. But like all these guys, like Bridget Gabriel and all these people who say things like Muhammad was a pedophile, and oh, these guys are like this, that, all the things, nasty things that they say about Islam, though they may be true. Or the fact of the matter is, these guys feed on that, right? These guys say, yeah, for these guys, it's a non-issue. If you call them names, it's a non-issue for them. If you call them prophet names, it's a non-issue for them. They accept that those parts of their prophet as a normal thing, and they seek to emulate those things. It's not something of a shocker to them that they're doing it ignorantly. They're not. And the more the Western media, the more the Western societies point these things out, these guys turn around and say, oh, right, please say more of these things, because then we can prove you to be racist, we can prove you to be xenophobic, we can prove a lot of things. And that sort of ends up working against what you're trying to do.
Actually, one way that I've seen this strategy in play was not long ago, actually, because since Trump's come in office, he started cracking down on things like illegal immigration in America. And one thing that a bunch of people who were about to get deported because they got captured by ICE, the immigration, I can't remember the acronym in America, but their immigration agency. Thank you. Your memory's better than mine. But anyway, it was an article about how these illegal immigrants got caught and were going to get sent back. But then they started claiming that it was racism why this was happening, and nothing to do with the fact they entered illegally or broke the law. It had everything to do with just the fact that Donald Trump and the damn American people were so racist. That was what the problem was. It seemed, yeah, it's definitely a go-to strategy, and this is being used heavily in my country right now. But I feel like it's going to get to the point when everyone just goes around calling each other racist or bigot or whatever words, while they don't care, like, we do. It seems that we do over here. It's calling somebody racist is a good way to get them to shut up. But I find that I was just going to say that as this goes on, I feel like this is going to have less relevance to people. Like, you're going to call someone racist or sexist or this, that, and the other, and they're just going to be, yeah, okay. And then that's it. The left won't have any more argument because people are just going to essentially do that. They're going to accept and be like, okay, you think I'm racist, fine then. And then that'll be the end of it. I don't know if that'll actually be that simple, but I feel like it's going to get to a point where people are just going to stop caring about getting called names or words or stuff like that.
So see, that strategy is one of the founding pillars of soft Islamism, right? It's one of the founding pillars. That's one of the go-to strategies of how soft Islamism sort of spreads. It feeds on racial guilt of the past. Now, and you said very correctly that the day that racial guilt is out the window, this strategy fails. But the fact is, people on the street go on the back foot. I'll tell you a personal story, right? My parents live in England. My parents live in England. Now, they were getting some work done in the house. And this was before the Brexit vote, right? They were speaking. So my mom started talking to the person who was doing the work. He was I think a landscaper or something. So they got talking about the Brexit thing. And this guy says that every time we do something, every time we take a decision for ourselves, they call us racists. So what do we do? So my mom said one thing, that yeah, that will happen. Past has a role to play, but the fact is the past is the past. You have to make decisions now, which are in your own interest. You have to safeguard your own interest. So if you have to do that, you have to take some tough decisions. And you have to sort of grit and bear what comes for a little while till it fades. And it will fade. And that guy, like sort of, he was a normal British white guy, and that guy sort of he was very perplexed by this answer, because in India we know exactly how these guys operate. We have the most experience with Islam and how they try and undermine societies. So this is the whole thing, that they try the soft thing, they try the hard thing, they try every trick in the book to get people to convert. And the most deadly part of their thing is they say, Earth is a transit lounge kind of thing. Earth is a transitory place from where we have to ascend to the real place, which is paradise. Now, this can be interpreted in two ways. That yes, Earth is a place where we have come, we have to learn the lessons and we have to ascend spiritually. Or literally, where we said we have to blow everybody up out to smithereens. We have to atomize humanity, which is the death cult version of Islam, which is being propagated today. So this is very, this is a problem which has to be looked at very seriously, and you have to grit and bear it when people call you racist. You have to grit and bear it for a while, because that will pass. They can only call you names for so long. And that is why that is why I can see the progressive part, as a progressive concept. The PC party is so excited today that finally they've got a foothold somewhere.
Absolutely.
In this train wreck that is the liberal government currently.
Absolutely. And the thing is, too, that's happening over here, too, is areas where that have typically been liberal dominated, like the province I live in, they've had a provincial liberal government since 2003, I believe. And the province right next to us, Quebec, is the same thing. They've always been underneath a liberal government for a long time. Like, Quebec was always a liberal powerhouse for them. And now these areas, these inside of our country, are starting to go towards more right-wing parties. Right now, the Conservative Party, the Progressive Conservatives, are dominating in my province. And then over in Quebec, it's a center-right party. I can't remember the name of it. It's like the Coalition du Québec or something like that. And it's a center-right party that is moving away from the typical left-wing politics. So it seems that what I think ended up happening actually was, I believe that when Donald Trump in America came into office, it was like, when I think about like a lot of how these postmodernists work, and a lot of the ways the same way that a lot of Islamists work. It's slow. It's about educating, like essentially twisting people's minds to believe something. And one way you can see this is in Sweden, where they don't even want to talk about some racial issues simply because they think it's racist. So when I think Donald Trump came into office, and then he started saying like, essentially he was going to undo all of the work that had been done at this point by these organizations, I think they began doubling down. And I think this is why things like news suddenly became so partisan, especially in America. Suddenly the whole fake news thing came up, and it was like we were starting to expose mainstream media for a lot of the lies that they were telling us and trying to pass off. So what I think ended up happening is that everyone started doubling down. I don't think Trudeau would have been as extreme left-wing politician like as a prime minister if Trump hadn't been in office. I think he'd be much more slow moving. But I feel like for a lot of these groups, it's caused them to double down, and now it's exposing them for what they really are, such as the progressives. We're seeing all the crazy things that they want to push. It's unbelievable. I mean, right now in America, after the Parkland shooting, they've got kids that are the face of the anti-gun movement in America. It's just getting ridiculous. So I think this is really what ended up happening with these groups, is they were forced to expose themselves, and now the rest of the world is seeing them for what they are. The regular people are seeing them for what they are, and we're starting to move back towards a more right wing. We're starting to realize that the left has been deceiving us for a long time.
Yeah, if you delve into the subject regarding like doubling down as far as I said, majority values, right? In that part, in our last discussion, we had discussed majority values, right, as one of the pillars to sort of counter the left. See, the thing about the majority people, the conservative doubling down, is yes, it completely sort of puts a wrench in the plans of the soft Islamist guys, those who are peddling soft Islamism. And what about the gun debate? Yeah, we can have an interesting discussion about that, because like in India we don't believe in like having guns, like not as a leftist thing. It's a principle. Like we are non-violent, so non-violence as a principle. So that's another way of looking at the gun thing. But the fact of the matter is, because in the West, in North America, it is a sort of a foundational sort of principle that right to bear arms shall not be infringed. It has become a left-right debate. But the actual thing is that left never let a good crisis go to waste. It's a very Hitlerian thing, right? So the Parkland shooting, it was a tragedy. But kids are very easily molded. Like you can just direct them with like 2 words. You can just send them in a particular direction. Yeah, somebody must have approached those kids and said, "Oh, you're afraid. Oh, do you never want this to happen again? Go and shout at the conservatives." And that's exactly what happened. How easy was it? It was extremely easy. But the fact is, but the actual issue is not that. The actual issue is, why is this debate happening at all? Why is this debate happening at all? Right? If both were right, or if even if one was absolutely right, there would be no debate. Right? So there is something to it in that sense. But as far as Trump, the Trump phenomenon is a phenomenon for reasons which people sometimes don't get, is that they needed somebody to double, triple, quadruple down on the fact that conservatives need a voice, and that voice, that listening, needs to be out there. And everything connected to that has sort of been plunged into chaos, because there was this really establishment and institutional sort of rigidity that had set in with this narrative, with starting with those guys, Woodrow Wilson and those guys from the early progressives, that the founding fathers were not wise. The Constitution is not a great thing. Americans are imperialists. That thing sort of, and that America is a great state, and that kind of thing, etc. And that is the thing. There is a section of society which thinks that the past crimes are so heinous that somehow it is unforgivable. And there is a section of society which wants to move on and is saying that let's move on. That has happened. It's okay. We are sorry about it. Let's move on. But there is a certain section of society which won't let you go. And there is too much emphasis being put on that section of society, even in Canada. Trudeau is giving too much emphasis on apologizing. He went on that apology tour. So when Trump is going on a thank you tour, he's going on an apology tour. So you tell me what's happening. So yeah.
Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, when we're talking historical problems too, I have my problem that I have with that is if we're talking in historical context, sure, a lot of things didn't happen that long ago in the grand scheme of things. But when we're talking about sort of like everyday society and how the people should act, something that happened 200, 300 years ago before our lives is a long time. Like we're talking personal lives. That is a long time ago. So one thing that in particular I'm thinking of is when I guess it was about a year ago now, when the New Democratic Party were running for their new leader before Jagmeet Singh won. They had a debate in Ottawa between everybody who was running, and 3 out of the 4 who came out said that they recognized they were on unceded Algonquin territory, which was the capital. Like they were in the capital of our country saying that. And my problem with it is that sure, if we're talking 300 years ago in a historical context, that's not long at all. But if you want me to feel bad for something that happened 300 years ago, you want me to make up for something that happened 300 years ago. Well, that was 300 years before my life. You can't hold me responsible or anybody else responsible for what the people did in that time. We're also trying to apply a modern day morality to these people back then. We're trying to say, like, at the time, something like imperialism was just the state of the world. Every single country wanted to branch out and be the most powerful, dominate the most land, the most people. That was the way it was. But now we're trying to act like what we know today and what we think today should have applied to them back then. So that's my real problem when we're talking about all this historical problems that the left constantly wants to bring up. And it is a vocal minority that is speaking for the silent majority. I think that is one of the big problems these days, is that everybody is hearing these people speak up, and it annoys them, but they're waiting for somebody else to say something about that. They're waiting for somebody like, say, you or me, somebody who's going to be online doing that, but nobody wants to speak up about it in their own personal lives about how it annoys them or how it's wrong. So I think this is the two problems that with the historical context that we're having right now.
Yeah, so see, the Romans killed Jesus Christ. Is that fair to say? Right?
What's that?
The Romans killed Jesus Christ. That's a fair statement, right?
Yeah.
The Romans did crucify him. So will you make today's Italians apologize to the Christians and say you owe us reparations? You won't, because who will you trace down? You will have to trace down genealogies. And then you will have to put a price on their suffering and say that, okay, you have suffered this much, you will get this much for that much suffering. Which is ludicrous and a completely mad sort of an argument. You will destroy the current economy and current society trying to give reparation. Then, because the reparations that you give, you will have to back sort of in a sort of a retrospective manner. You have to pay interest on that also. You have to give them the interest amount also. So $10, even if you have to pay $10 in reparation to somebody, you will have to pay 300, 400, 500 years worth of interest on $10, compound interest, which will exceed the current amount of wealth that exists. So reparations is a bad idea.
Well, and the thing with reparations is, when does it end? Like, because I'm sure, like, you could give out some money at first, but then there's going to be people who say it's not enough and they want more, okay? And then there's going to be another group of people that say that's not enough, they want more. So where does reparation end? And does every single group that has been discriminated against deserve some form of reparations?
Yeah, that's exactly. And how much will you give? How much will you keep giving? See, this feeds into that social security thing, no? that the left gives you. That they give you loan, they give you those food coupons and all that, so to keep you hooked to that free stuff that we were talking about last time. That they try and give you free stuff, free healthcare, free this, that. So the reparations is just another thing that fits into that model. Yeah, and they
actually,
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. I was just going to say, when you're saying free stuff, just this week, my Liberal government, a couple months before election, free childcare.
And then like looking into that farmer care thing, right?
Yeah. There you go. You're right there. Everything you just said is validated because they've just started offering free stuff in 2018, trying to buy people's votes. So you're right there. You're what you said is just validated.
And Stephen Harper left like a $500 billion worth of budget surplus. How much down are you now? How much is the budget deficit now?
Our debt is $1 trillion.
So and there was a $500 billion worth of budget surplus when Harper left. Right? There's something like that. It was a figure like that.
I think so. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, right. I think you're right.
So if you're in deficit $1 trillion now, that means you have gone down $1.5 trillion. You're in $1.5 trillion in debt. Which is like nearly the size of the Canadian economy, right?
Yeah. And actually, that surplus was there in like 2006 or something like that. So we're only talking like 12 years. Because I remember, like, even when in my life, when I was younger, I remember hearing about that surplus. And then all of a sudden, that's completely changed. And now we've gone down to I know our recent budget was $18.5 billion deficit. And just recently, our debt has reached $1 trillion in deficit. And I know for a fact that Trudeau has put about as much debt up in his 2 years in office as our last Prime Minister Harper did in his entire 9-10 years. And Harper at least was reducing reducing the budget deficit at that time, and he actually got us into a surplus by his final year. And then by 3 budgets, Trudeau's completely undone everything that Harper did in that time. And that's all been done by the left.
See, think about it that way. That Trudeau is doing what? See, Trudeau promised about $6 billion deficit, and now it's become
$9 billion deficit a year.
Okay, so 18. It has ballooned to 18 billion over 2 years, right? So, and he said something like it will take another 50 years for the budget to balance.
Yeah,
30
by
years.
The final.
Yeah. So see, here what I would like to say is that he's spending $35-40 million on rehabilitation of terrorists, and he can't give veterans money.
He's spending, I can't remember the exact amount, but I think it's something like $200 million just to process illegal migrants that are crossing over our borders as well. This is what he's putting the money into. In fact, the one thing about our budget was that the big thing that Trudeau was talking about when he said that we're going to invest $9 billion a year and for 3 years, and then the final year, the budget will balance itself. His plan was to invest in infrastructure in that time. In this final budget that just came out, there was over 350 mentions of gender in the budget, and there was only at best a couple, maybe 3 times that infrastructure was named, and the amount of spending going to infrastructure is tiny. Like, they're saying that the amount of money that they're putting forward infrastructure in Canada won't even boost infrastructure in our country by 1%. It'll be like 0.4% or something like that. So Trudeau's plan is completely fallen apart. And again, like you said, he was supposed to have an 18 billion deficit in 2 years. In one budget, he's already gone over that. Granted, it's his 3rd budget, but he put 18.5 billion deficit in this budget, and that's already that's like 2/3 or something of what he was promising over his entire course as Prime Minister. So he's completely fucked up in that regard.
And it doesn't help that his finance minister Bill Morneau is under investigation by the Ethics Commission. It doesn't help.
No, not at all.
These things are just completely working against Trudeau, and that's why that is one of the solid reasons why the PC party is so excited. Like this, Doug Ford won, right? Doug Ford won, and in Ontario, and all these guys, the PC is like really coming together on this, and it's really fun. See, earlier I used to watch Pierre and Poilievre sort of bail on the Liberal Party, and I used to really love that guy because he's very combative and witty. Right now with Candice Bergen, now with Michelle Rempel and all these guys coming in and joining the party, it's like become like a right ruckus in the parliament. and it's really working out in favor of the conservatives. So, yeah, and if you are putting in $200 million into immigration for mostly Islamic migrants, right? Mostly Islamic migrants. You are not giving money for the persecuted Christians in Syria. You're not giving the money for persecuted Christians in the Middle East and Lebanon and all these places, right? In Jordan, persecuted Christians and the Druze in Jordan. You're not giving money for that.
In fact, actually, we've rejected them before in the past. I know in 2015, they were preferencing Muslim migrants, even though the Christians were in a significantly much more dangerous position. And we took, I think, 97 or 98% Muslim migrants, and at best, was 2% Christian migrants at best. We're just leaving them there to die.
Yeah. So, and tell me, in a country with a small population, like say 35 million, right? Your population about 35, 36 million.
About
right?
36, yeah.
Yeah. So, in a small country, just like Sweden, over a period of time, this is a sort of a strategically people are trying to change the demographics of the country. You can say, you can look at it like that. That somebody is strategically trying to change the demographics of the country. And then you see soft Islamism and all these social Sharia law and all these things now creeping up. People like Ikra Khalid, like Cameron Ahmed, who's also connected to the Muslim Brotherhood through that same Muslim Students Organization Association. I think I'm not sure about that. I'll have to check that out. So, but yeah, something like that. It is like he has ties to the Muslim Brotherhood. And he's the personal sort of assistant. He's like the personal sort of, he's the principal like assistant or aide of Trudeau. And Huma Abedin, another person who's a Pakistani, like she was the right-hand person of Hillary Clinton. How is this happening? This is how it's happening. This is in fact worsening the problem, but there is a blind spot which the Canadian security establishment has to this creeping problem. Because Muslims, the day they are even 40% of the population, they will just declare Canada as an Islamic republic. Okay, but they don't even need to be 50%.
We're already seeing it now in some ways. Like I know that in our civil courts now, when it comes to certain things like divorce, those can be handled under a Sharia court now in Canada, and that's been a big contentious issue here. And yeah, little things too. Like one of the big fights that Michelle Rempel has been fighting right now has to do with female genital mutilation. And when she's been fighting our immigration minister on that, he can't give a damn answer on what when it comes to female genital mutilation. Like she just wants a simple answer saying, are you going to prevent Canadians from, like Canadian girls from having that committed to them? And are you going to prevent them from going abroad and having that committed? And they can never give an answer on that. And it really is just changing like the demographics and the values of a country is what it seems like. I know that there was a report that came out, I think it was this past summer, maybe it was last spring, like spring 2017. And it was talking about how there was heavy money influence inside our election. They said about something like $6 million went to third parties in order to kick out conservatives. I know that one of the people that did this was a group called Lead Now, who have had problems in the past because at least I don't know about liberals, but they have shown support for NDP in the past. But they ran a campaign which was about strategic voting, and they said, at least according to their statistics, 25 out of the 29 ridings they targeted, they managed to knock out the conservative MP who was in place, and those were positions that they held, positions of power for maybe at least they got in the last election at the very least. But 25 out of the 29 ridings were knocked out by these groups, and it seems to me that this could just been it was definitely seeming like it was coming from progressive groups. So it seems to me like this was some sort of obviously it was some sort of targeted intervention into our federal election. But it seems to me like this may have been the main point, is knocking out certain candidates and allowing other ones to get inside, essentially, whether that be Ikra Khalid or any of these other ones. And then they can just make the changes right from the top down, which they are doing right now. I find it weird that Trudeau is so aligned with them, aside for the fact maybe he's just doing it for the power trip, you know?
See, as I said, Trudeau is not sort of ideologically rooted, so he will do whatever it takes. He will do whatever it takes for for further his own whatever his own journey is in this, for his own trip in this. He's doing whatever it takes to further that. So like see, another thing is that yeah, the money, as I said, is the Pakistanis and the Chinese who are funneling money into this. That is why there is a grave security concern in Canada right now. Okay, see, soft Islamism is not only like this sociological thing; it's also the economic thing that these guys are funneling money into this place. And once this once and yeah, see, for example, there was this when the M103 bill came out, the Toronto Star published an article condemning that. What these guys did was they got like 1,000+ Muslim girls, right, young girls, to with individually 1,000+ individually crafted letters, yeah, and they sent it to all these editors of these news organizations, including the Toronto Star, who were sort of campaigning against the Sharia law thing. So these girls, they just landed up at these offices. Who they were either working there as interns, or they were working there as, or they just showed up as protesters, or sort of to give the editor to hand the editor a note saying that okay, we didn't like this, and then just put these news organizations on a back foot, and they stopped publishing these articles. So see, soft Islamism can only be combated by people who know about it and who knows these guys better than one of their own. People like Tariq Fatah, people, and other moderate Muslims like them, they know these guys better than anybody else. But the RCMP, CSIS and all, they don't approach them because they don't look Muslim enough.
They don't look Muslim enough. Jesus.
so, which is an odd thing to consider. Like if you are that hard pressed to fight terrorism, then you will take whatever you get, right? So so why this hijab fetish? I don't know. Why this fetish about hijabs? Why this stereotypical sort of understanding that a guy has to have the beard, the mustacheless beard? I don't get it.
I don't know either, but it's just I think it just has to do with the more the propaganda that's going around, because Western feminists have really allied themselves with Islam, and I think it's because as the third wave feminism has become about equity and equality of outcome, they're using any single group they can to push their message, and I think this is the reason why they're aligning themselves with Islam, because of the whole idea of Islamophobia. It's very easy, and the hijab is something very easy to point to and say like it's just like, you know, you're just discriminating against them because you don't like it. When in, you know, somebody like you or I who've actually looked into it, we realized that that's not actually something that was in like part of Islam for a long time, like having women covered up in the burqa. That came in with Wahhabism, was really the big one, I believe, that brought in the burqa, hijab, and all that. And sure, I mean, I'm sure there's some girls out there that actually feel like in Western countries or like any like democratic countries that feel like it is their choice to put it on. And I'm sure it is. But for most women in other countries, they don't have that choice. And the things they've got to do in order to like accommodate in public. I remember there was this one video where one woman somewhere in the Middle East, I think it was Saudi Arabia, her burqa was becoming sort of tangled up or something. It wasn't sitting properly. So there was about 3 or 4 women that were like surrounding her, holding up sheets so that way she could adjust herself while she was out in public. But just the idea of her being able to adjust that to fit properly in public was actually like a problem for the authorities, the moral police inside Saudi Arabia. It was actually like even the thought of her hair being exposed was just a terrible sin. So I think this is really where it's come from when it comes to Western feminists. It's just more about aligning themselves with groups where they can push their agenda more than anything. Because Western feminists, the third wave ones, have really been mired in that postmodernism and cultural Marxism. So it just feeds into their narrative like perfectly.
Yeah, see, when I was checking into this, like for example, there was all female ministers, the panel of ministers that went to Iran, was it Iran? When they covered up in hijab, they covered up their heads, right? Those Swedish ministers, the women. So there was this excellent meme I had seen while reading up on that, when on one hand they were showing these extreme feminist groups like Femen and all that, where they were basically streaking, right, in the nude. They were streaking through the streets and shrieking at people in the nude with messages written on their bodies and all that. And on the other hand, they're showing these like representatives of this feminist movement, these Swedish ministers, all completely hijab in Iran, which sort of completely exposes that kind of hypocrisy, right? That here you, in the Western world where you have all the freedom in the world, you are basically not even bothering to wear clothes. And, and running through the streets, which is actually illegal. Speaking is illegal. Like public nudity is illegal. So you are doing that because that's basically a tantrum. And when you are faced with actual opposition, you cow down to it. Because why? You have to somehow push your agenda. You see these guys who have perpetrated some of the worst atrocities on earth, on themselves and on people like Indians. Like 200-300 years ago, there was this one time where on a single day they killed nearly 100,000 Hindus. They slaughtered 100,000, and it is estimated that from between the year the year 900 and the year 1200, about 80 million Hindus were killed. Right? There is a mountain range in Afghanistan, in that Afghanistan region, which is called the Hindu Kush. You know what Kush means? Kush means slaughter.
And it's just filled with bodies?
No, what happened was the Arab slave traders, what they used to do was they would raid, they would pick up people, men, women, children, whatever they could get their hands off, and they would drag them through that pass. And because of winter, in winter time, if that pass would close up or something, they would not bother to let those people go. They would say it was more economically viable for them to just slaughter all those Hindus over there. That's why it's called the Hindu Kush, the Hindu slaughter. Kush is a Persian word which means slaughter. So these guys are some of the worst perpetrators of atrocities and genocides on earth. For years, they burned. See, Hinduism is a very old religion, tens of thousands of years old, if not hundreds of thousands of years old. And the amount of scriptural means the scriptures, the knowledge of this country that they have burned. It took them years to just burn knowledge in our country. And these guys are seen as victims, that they are freedom fighters and martyrs. That is unbelievable to anybody who knows history.
I've noticed that when I've started to notice that people who want to give us a lesson on morality are usually people who have aligned themselves with the worst ideologies to give a morality lesson. Because when we're thinking about the postmodernists and cultural Marxists, they're literally walking underneath the hammer and sickle of communism. And communism was pretty much the single greatest killer of human beings in the 20th century alone. On top of that, I do notice that a lot of days I'm getting a moral lesson from the Islamists. And again, we're talking about history of terrible slaughter. And then again, you touched on the Islamic slave trade. That's actually something that kills me when we talk about slavery in the West, is that nobody ever wants to talk about the Arab slave trade. But the Arab slave trade, as far as I know, they took more people. They worked them a lot harder and gave them less less food, less housing, and they like slaves underneath the Arab slave trade had a much shorter lifespan, that they ended up getting slaughtered, or just because they were malnourished, they would end up dying. So nobody ever wants to talk about that, yet everybody loves pointing to the slave trade that happened in America or in Europe. And don't get me wrong, that doesn't forgive what happened with the slave trade in those countries, but we can't just point to one and say that the American slave trade was the worst atrocity ever to happen, completely blanketing over the other atrocities that are happening. And again, like, I didn't know about what this happened with the Hindu Kush. I didn't know that this whole slaughter ended up happening up there. But that's just another thing that's being covered up. Now, granted, again, we're talking hundreds of years ago, so in our personal life, it's a long time. If we're talking if we're talking in a historical context and everything that Islam has done, it's just par for the course. It's just, this is exactly what they've done to any country they have entered. And a lot of ways we can see that when the Carthaginians, sorry, not the, I don't know why I went so far back. Not the Carthaginians. Sorry, the Ottomans, when they were expanding their empire, there was a hell of a slaughter that was going on for anybody who ever put up a resistance to them. Like, it was, from what I've heard, it was one of the most brutal expansions underneath the Ottoman Empire, as far as I know.
So, see, for example, we had become too liberal. I'll give you the Indian example. We had become too liberal. In the 1200s, or slightly before that, maybe in the 1100s, when the Muslim invaders came, when Muhammad Ghori came, he came, and the king at that time fought him 16 times or 17 times. 17 times they fought a war, and 16 times the Hindu king defeated Muhammad Ghori. Right? And each time he just said sorry and they let him go. Because that was the code of conduct back then, that if somebody apologizes, you let them go. That's how the liberal Hindu society had become. So, 17th time what Muhammad Ghori did was, he got his father-in-law and his father-in-law's army. So the two armies converged on this guy and defeated the Hindu king, and they entered India. They sacked many historical treasures, like Somnath temple, which had a floating. It was a suspended. I think it was made out of some special metals, which uses the properties of magnetism. It was a floating shivling. It was a floating like a statue of Shiva, that representative of the Shiva. So at that time, and they broke that shivling. They sacked that temple. They did unspeakable things to the people over there, and we have suffered for our liberalism, for our non-violence. We have suffered for it.
Unfortunately, go ahead.
These guys, and if you call them violent slave traders, for example, I tell you, these Arab slave traders enslaved and captured and enslaved people, and they carried on the black Africans were the slave the African slave trade carried on for about 400 years, right? 450 years.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. The Indian slave trade carried on for 1100 years.
Oh, geez.
From the year 711, was in the 700s sometime, to the late 1800s. Okay. So there was a 1100-year period where a very barbaric slave trade was being carried out in India. And not only that, these Arabs were trying to sell black Africans as slaves to Indians, to the Indian kings. Which the Indian kings refused. For example, there's an example in Gujarat, right? The capital of Gujarat is Ahmedabad. From about 100 kilometers from there is a village, okay, inhabited by only Africans. Why? Because the Arab slave traders had tried to sell African slaves to the king over there, and he felt so bad, he bought those slaves and gave them villages to live in, and then just let them go free. and those guys today, they wear African clothes, they follow African traditions, but they speak Gujarati. They speak Gujarati, which is the language of Gujarat, and that is, see, that is the history. Nobody has suffered under the Muslims more than Hindus have. There is nobody on earth who have suffered more than the Hindus under the Muslims.
And then when I look at any mainstream articles that talk about the history of India, they can't help but to paint the other story and say, like, well, you know, the Muslims, they've had such a hard time living in India under Hinduism. I mean, they make reference to, you know, what happened by, like, what we talked about last time about back in the 80s and, like, the riots that happened on the streets. But nobody ever talks about the long history of Islam and how they have how they've really preyed on the Hindus for a long time. Which again, like I've said again, there's a difference between we're talking about personal lives, we're talking historical context. But when we're talking about like when we're talking about the relationship between two cultures, we're talking about the historical context, and we can see where this has been a problem for both Hindus, like for the Hindus, because they've been really preyed upon, as I said before, preyed upon by the Muslims. Yeah, like I didn't know that the history was that long, actually, because that's something we're not told about. Right now, they just push the Islamophobia narrative, and then they just, whatever little discrimination they can find, they blow it out of proportion, make it into a big story.
And the icing on the cake is that, see, the Hindus are today angry with Muslims not because of that long history. Actually, if you roam the country and if you talk to people, they are not angry with Muslims because Muslims did all those terrible things. It's not that. We are angry. The Hindus are angry because they refuse to apologize for it. Today also, these guys, if you go to the mosques, if you go to any of these Muslim guys, they will say, we used to rule this country and we are proud of it and we will do it again. That's what they say. This is why we Hindus are angry. Because we have forgiven the British for their colonialism. Even they captured us and they sold us off as slaves in other parts of the world, the Caribbean, the South America, and all these places, in Africa. So these guys are refusing to apologize. The British have already apologized, and not only apologized many times. Okay, so which is fine. We have moved on. We don't harbor any acrimony towards the British anymore. I don't think we do. So, but Muslims refuse to apologize. And if you go and talk to anybody in Guantanamo Bay, if you go and talk to anybody who has been captured, who was trying to commit terrorism, they will refuse to apologize, and so will the people who are close to them.
If they apologize, then that would be admitting to doing something wrong. So if they don't apologize, then it makes them look like the victims, because that's what I've noticed here is every time our government apologizes, it makes them look guilty for something like that. And then that is used that's used as fuel by the other side in order to fan the flames.
See, last time when we spoke, I had quoted a verse from the Quran, but actually I made a mistake there. It's not from the Quran, it's in the Hadith about jihad, right? So these guys, they don't feel that they're doing wrong. They are morally, they feel justified in doing what they do. Right? And that is exactly why they have accepted so many terrible things about their prophet. Right? The thing about Aisha, the thing about him being a warlord, the thing about him beheading scholars and anybody who opposed him, things like that. The warlord aspect of him, they have accepted because of this. Because the Sunnis believe in expansion through conquest.
I find it funny.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I find it funny that they'll accept all this about their prophet, but even his wife, Aisha, said at one point, she turned to him and said, "You know, Muhammad, it feels like you're just making this up as you go."
Oh, buddy, oh, be careful, you can just might ban you.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
How many strikes do you have? So yeah, so the fact is, no, the story of Muhammad is that like he married his first wife, and then one day he went to, at the age of 40, one day he just went to meditate in the mountains, and then came back and said, "I have that the angel Gabriel has revealed this to me." Okay, that's fine. But the fact is, if divinity, see, the thing about divinity is divinity, and I'm delving into a little bit of theology here to make a point here. The thing about divinity is like a tree, right? This is our perspective on divinity. The infinite divine, the one true divine, the God who we call God, is like a tree, right? During means during the heat of summer. Now you are caught under the blazing sun. Now, if you want shade, you have to go under the tree. The tree will not come to you. Now, if the tree has fruit in it, then you will have to go climb the tree and pick the fruit. The tree will not bend down and give you the fruit. Now, the divine is very impersonal like that. Divine is not interested in like intimidating you. Divine is not interested in smiting you. He's not. God is not a jealous God. God is not a violent God. God is just God. He just exists and he has always existed, always will exist. Just like the tree. The tree existed before you came, will exist after you. So there is some sort of misinterpretation that has happened in this whole thing, that they have interpreted some of the most rigid, in the worst possible way, what God could possibly have revealed. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt, saying that okay, God did reveal something. Okay, if that is the case, then you have interpreted it the most literal, worst possible way. Okay, and the other thing is the Quran is not in the chronological order of revelations. Quran, the first revelation is not the first revelation, the last revelation is not the last. And if Quran is truly the last word of God, according as the Muslims claim, as the Sunnis claim, that as revealed to Muhammad, then tell me something. Why does the Hadith and the Shura and all these things exist? Why do these? Because somebody thought, okay, this is the Quran, this is the Holy Quran, and let me improve upon it by adding a whole bunch of laws after that to govern society. Right? So, and by the way, first revelation of the Quran, which Tariq Fatah, I saw in Tariq Fatah's video, is apparently, it says, learn to read and write. If that is the thing, then how come, except for those Islamic countries which were under communist rule, under communist Russia in Central Asia and all these places, in the, like for example Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Azerbaijan, and all these places, these countries have the only 100% literate Muslims. Yeah, 100% literate Muslims. Remember the Chechenian conflict in Russia?
Yeah.
Yeah. Who were the Chechen rebels? There were Salafis. There were Salafi Muslims. The Bosnian conflict between Christians and hardliner Muslims. Yeah. So on all these things, the Balkans and all these places, 100% educated Muslims. The Boston Bombers from one of these places, from one of these former Soviet Islamic countries, right?
Yeah, I think it was Pakistan, actually, they were from. I could be wrong, but I think I heard it was Pakistan.
What are the Kasimov brothers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think they were. I think they were one of these. You should you should check that out.
Okay.
Which country they were from? I'm not sure which country they were from, but they're from one of those Islamic countries which were part of the former Soviet. But the fact is, you will find 100% literacy in these places, in these former Soviet Islamic republics. But in the Arab Islamic republics, in the African Islamic republics, any other Islamic republic, majority of Muslims are not educated and live in poverty.
Yeah, I've been noticing that too from the stats, is that they're saying that literacy is extremely low in the Middle East right now. Yeah, I've heard about that too.
Yeah. So Why, if God's first revelation chronologically, or if even if you don't look at it chronologically, even if one of God's revelations was learn to read and write, then if you consider yourself to be such a good Muslim that you're willing to lay down your life to blow somebody else up, to destroy humanity, which you think is one of the goals, then how come you are missing out on that very crucial thing which God has said, that learn to read and write? That you are not doing. You are selectively picking up things from the Quran and you are propagating as, and then you are judging other people whether they are good Muslims or not. Basically, ISIS is, how did ISIS get so many recruits so fast from countries where you would have never thought to get ISIS recruits from, which Al Qaeda could not get, like from these former Soviet republics, from Central Asia, from God, God knows which all corners of the earth Muslims came and joined ISIS. Right? How did ISIS get? Because they did one thing. They just stood up in one place and said, "We are good Muslims. We are the only good Muslims. All you other Muslims are not good enough to be Muslim." So what these guys did was, in their slavish sort of mentality, what they did was they said, "Oh no, sir, please accept me to ISIS. We are good Muslims. Please accept us. We will prove to you how good we are as Muslims." And then they came to join ISIS. They played this reverse psychology trick.
Holy crap! Yeah, like I was going to say that when we talked about how many people ended up joining ISIS, I was just going to say that I thought perhaps it had something to do with the fact that they were able to, they were just preaching a message that they knew the extremists would listen to, and the fact that they had access to the internet also I thought would be. Because I know that they were very active online. I think they had a number of YouTube, like at least one YouTube channel that used to get a fair amount of activity where they used to post all their videos. And on top of that, nobody did anything to stop it. I mean, YouTube got countless complaints about these videos getting put up, but they refused to actually do anything about it for a long time. I think they eventually did take down that channel, but you know, it was active for months at least. And this was during like when ISIS was at its strongest point, when it was recruiting the most, when it was the most influential, and nobody on the social media platforms were doing anything to stop it.
And the thing was that these ISIS guys, these Arab ISIS guys, used to look down, and they wouldn't even consider them worthy to be their dogs. These other Muslim people used to come from other places, Muslims from Pakistan, Muslims from Africa, Muslims from Central Asia, and all these places. They were treated like what? They would be given menial jobs like toilet cleaners, and would have third or fourth hand rights on women slaves and things like that. Right? They had these edicts. And the funny thing was, these guys would be sent to the front lines first, and then the Arab ISIS guys would come up. And you would see things like these on they would have dug trenches, and wherever in the trenches they had their quarters, piled to the roof you would find amphetamine pills.
Sorry, say that again.
So they would find amphetamine pills piled to the roof.
Oh, they were all drugged up.
Yeah. So ISIS was this. It was a phenomenon by itself. And coming to the hard terror point of it, these guys ended up influencing other terrorist groups like Boko Haram in Nigeria and all these places, right? Al-Shabaab in Egypt, and all in Philippines there was that group. In Bangladesh, the Jamaat-e-Ittehad-e-Islami in Bangladesh, right? The Bangladesh wing of ISIS. Pakistan, so they had Tehrik-e-Taliban, and all these things who are now connected. They pushed Al-Qaeda out of their own turf and took over Al-Qaeda's turf. How did they do this? Just by sending out a simple message that we are the only true Muslims, all you other Muslims are not good enough. That is the only message that they sent out. And this shocked me to my core to say that how sort of hollow the lives of these brainwashed people must have been to just get triggered by this one small sentence. If somebody comes and tells me that, oh, Arjun, you are not, I am the only true Hindu, you are not Hindu enough. My first reaction will not be to prove how Hindu I am. Because my sort of my religious theology and philosophy offers me enough sort of solace and empowerment for me to not react. So, so we should take the help of moderate Muslims to sort of understand how Islam works and how Islam is sort of got a grip. The fundamentalist elements of Islam is keeping a grip on the majority of Islam today. That is how we should sort of start to counter instead of trying to impose our values on them and trying to judge them by our values. It's not going to work. Judging them by our own values is not going to work because they don't follow the same rules that we do.
Absolutely. I mean, if they were to come here and try impose their values, it doesn't work too well for us. So absolutely. The other thing I think is too is that people in the West, people who aren't really woken up to like what's going on with Islam, they need to listen to what they're being told. Because I remember maybe it was in 2015, maybe 2016, ISIS put out, they had their magazine called Dabiq, and they ended up putting out an article that was called "Why We Hate You and Why We Fight You." And in it, they laid out why they were doing what they were doing. And pretty much top of the list, they said that the real reason that they were fighting is because we're not Muslims. That they said that their fight has to do with the fact that we are not Muslims. And they say, yeah, US and the West bombing us in our countries does play a factor. You know, if you stop bombing us, we'll leave you alone in order to deal with more immediate problems. But we will come for you sooner or later, and it is because you guys are not Muslim. And, you know, if they pretty much say it's like, you have your choices. You can convert to Islam. You can live under the jizya, the tax that anybody who's not Muslim living underneath Muslims, they can pay a tax in order to survive, although they're treated as second-class citizens. You can convert, you can pay the jizya, or you can be destroyed, essentially, was what ISIS was saying. Now, of course, ISIS is like one of the more extremist groups out there when we're talking about Islam. But this is a lot of the more extremist and Wahhabist Muslims, how they do feel and what they talk about. It has to do with the fact that we are not Muslim, that we're whatever, Hindu, Christian, atheist, whatever happens to be your religious belief. But that I feel that Western people need to listen closely when they're being told that they don't.
See, for example, you identify as an atheist, right? What's going to happen to you in Saudi Arabia?
Oh, I'd be killed. I can't even pay the jizya if it was to become a Muslim-dominated country. I'm done.
Yeah, the moment you step off the plane, instant beheading, right? So that is the kind of Islam that moderate Muslims also do, right? So the West has to sort of the moderate Muslims that they have to identify and empower those people. Because, like for example, like in Canada, the moderate Muslim groups say that the RCMP goes on Ramadan, eats all the biryani and all that at all these events held by these mosque people, but nobody comes to the moderate Muslim. All the moderate and conservative Muslim groups who have a balanced view of Islam and want to assimilate into Canadian society, they said we never get any RCMP visitors, we never get anybody from CCS, we don't get any politicians coming to meet us and trying to mingle with us, because we don't look like the stereotypical Muslim, and that's a problem. Like which has to that perception problem, that perception gap has to be filled. Otherwise, see, hard terror is maybe 5% of the problem, or at most 10% of the problem. Right? 90% of the problem is that soft Islamism, which leads to that hard Islamism. You will never get an ISIS if there is no Linda Sarsour.
That's a good one, actually. Linda Sarsour. Yeah, exactly. Because she preaches all of these things about Islam, about how it's feminist and how it's, you know, actually empowering to women. Meanwhile, we all see what the actual effects are. She's actually leading these women into a trap.
Yeah, now Linda Sarsour should be asked that why don't you go and live in Saudi Arabia? If you love that so much, why did you come to US? Saudi Arabia is a rich country. Why don't you go and live in Saudi Arabia? You should go and live in Qatar. Why? Because she will not be given even a half a penny's worth of importance over there.
She'd be shut up as soon as she started talking if she went over to the Saudi Arabia and she started thinking about feminism.
I tell you something very interesting about Muslim women. Any denomination of Islam, any sect of Islam, I tell you something about Muslim women. They don't want to wear the burqa or the hijab. They don't want to. Right? They wear it because they're told to. Okay.
Absolutely.
Now, I tell you something. In India, we had the Sharia law for the longest time. Right? Because the socialist governments of the past had introduced Sharia law into our law, into the penal code.
They introduced it into the penal code?
Yeah, or given equivalent status. It was given equivalent status, right? Except for murder, except for that kind of capital punishment and all that, property, marriage, everything would be governed by Islamic law. Okay, so
that's just a stepping stone.
It is. Last year, in 2016, 17, the government, for the longest time, we have been trying to bring in something called the Uniform Civil Code, that all religions will adhere to the same law. Okay, no matter what the sect or denomination. No matter what kind of minority you are, whether you are the majority or not, it doesn't matter. You will adhere to a uniform code. So that was, they were unable to bring it in because of opposition from the Islamic society. The Christians wanted, the Buddhists wanted, the Sikhs wanted, the Hindus wanted, the Jews wanted, everybody wants it, right? So the Muslims are the only ones. So last year, what they did was they started a campaign against the instant divorce, right? The instant divorce, what they have is that the Muslim man can at any point of time just say talaq, talaq, talaq. It's divorce, divorce, divorce 3 times, right? He just says divorce 3 times, and he's instantly legally divorced from his wife.
That's all it takes? Just divorce 3 times?
Yeah.
What is this, Beetlejuice?
That's called nikah halala, right? And it is actually illegal as per even the Quran. As per Islamic law, it is illegal, but they were following and saying this is a cornerstone of our faith, which led to serious sociological problems like women would be sent an email saying divorce thrice, a WhatsApp message saying divorce thrice, the Facebook Messenger, they would just send a divorce thrice or text them through message them somehow. They would send smoke signals saying divorce thrice and it would be done. It went to that. Oh no, I would say another thing. I would add another thing to that. Arab sheikhs from the Middle East, right, would come with and marry minor girls for 1 hour, 2 hours, maybe a day, and then divorce them and then go back.
Oh, that's disgusting.
It led to some things like that. So what the Indian government, the current Indian government under Narendra Modi did was that we want to sort of we are making illegal. We are making triple talaq illegal, and they made it illegal. And today, it was a landmark judgment which came 3-2, saying triple talaq is illegal. And you know who were the happiest? The Muslim women were the happiest.
They were the ones cheering this on. I bet, because I was going to say I could see that the men could be able to say divorce 3 times in their divorce, but the women would have no say in this, especially considering how under Sharia, a woman's testimony is what, half of a man?
No, she would need, God knows how many witnesses, 4 or 5 witnesses she would require. Okay, to just justify that I have been raped.
The laws underneath Sharia are ridiculous. Like, they are actually barbaric.
So the fact of the matter is that mullahs were doing disgusting things like marrying of minor girls to sheikhs for an hour and then happily dissolving the marriage. And these sociological problems plague all Arab, not only Arab, all Muslim communities where all this is prevalent. You think Linda Sarsour of all people wants Sharia? She has been told. She has been told she would be the least happy person under Sharia. She will run away if Sharia comes to US tomorrow. She will be the first person to run away. She'll come to Canada.
They always are. They always are, because there was one feminist activist from Germany who was very vocal during the 2015 crisis in order to bring them in. She, maybe it was about a month ago, she said that she was wrong on what she said, and then she was looking to move to Poland because of everything that had happened in Germany. And, you know, Poland hasn't taken in any of the refugees. So they were, so she was actually full out like, I'm going to try and move to Poland. So she brought this in, and when she realizes a problem, she was trying to run away from it. This is also going on in America, in California, is that now California is seeing a huge exodus. Now, this has more to do, I think, just the policies, the left-wing policies in general, than having to do with immigration as a whole. But there's also a lot of sanctuary cities over there for the illegals who cross the border. So right now they're seeing a huge exodus from California, and a lot of these people are doing the same thing. They're like, oh, we were wrong. You know, we're going to go move wherever, Arizona, Florida, these more Republican and conservative areas. And then everyone's just accusing them. They're saying, yeah, but you're going to move to these areas and you're just going to push the same damaging policies, and then you're going to do it all over again, and you're just going to run away once that happens. So that seems to be the standard for them. It's they run away when the going gets bad instead of fighting.
So the next time if you ever see a feminist activist, like from Femin or one of those groups, just ask them, you want to go to Saudi Arabia? Why don't you go and live in Saudi Arabia? It's such a peaceful place there. Why don't you go and why don't you go and streak through the streets over there and see what happens? And about that female genital mutilation, all these SJW groups and these feminist groups and all these liberals and all these left-leaning groups, they all condemn Ayaan Hirsi Ali. The Muslims, they do. But Ayaan Hirsi Ali is a woman, who is a Somali Muslim woman, who has openly condemned all this and goes to various platforms, public platforms, and she speaks out on all these issues, women's issues in Islam. See, she herself has been on the receiving end of many of those things. I don't know the extent of it, but yeah, and all these guys, they try to stop us from speaking.
Actually, oh, go ahead.
So that soft Islamism thing directly feeds hard Islamism, and hard Islamism feeds soft Islamism. It's like a vicious circle, and it's a global sort of Archimedes lever thing going on, seesaw thing going on. But you will see, for example, and even in the Middle East, the West's understanding of the Middle East is a little off. Okay, everybody in the West is condemning Iran, and nobody is addressing the real problem countries, which are Pakistan, which is enemy number 1, and Saudi Arabia, and Qatar, which are enemy numbers 2 and 3 respectively. Okay, this entire Trump crisis that happened in that Trump thing when he went to the Middle East, there was this Gulf crisis which was going on, when Qatar was ostracized from the Gulf coalition, and there were sanctions put on them, saying that Qatar supports terrorism, which it does, right? Not only does it support terrorism, it suppresses its indigenous population and the working population which comes from outside. Al Jazeera is a state-funded mouthpiece for the ISIS. It has been a long-standing mouthpiece for the ISIS, that Al Jazeera News, right? So everybody is blaming Iran, but the actual problem is Pakistan, enemy number 1, and enemy number 2 is Saudi Arabia, who's funding all these ISIS. Saudi Arabia calling Qatar a terror funding state, a supporter of terrorism, is like Al Qaeda calling ISIS terrorists. Okay. And then ISIS, and then Qatar saying that calling me terrorist is unfair. It's like ISIS saying that this is unfair. That you're calling me a terrorist, that is unfair. It's like that, right? That is the Shias have okay, psychologically speaking, and you can ask this you can speak with any moderate Muslim about this. Shias have low self-esteem. Okay. that ISIS trick that I was talking about, that we are the only two Muslims, that you are not Muslim enough. Shias are a very long-suffering tribe of people who have suffered under that, right? Shias are the ones who are shouting from the rooftops, "Look at me, how Muslim I am." That is the problem with Iran. Not that they are the mothership of terror. They are not. It is Pakistan and Saudi Arabia.
So
And
Iran's problem is more about spreading the ideology than anything, you would say?
no, they don't even spread ideology. Okay, I'll give you a challenge. Okay. Apart from Hezbollah and the Houthi rebels in Yemen, I challenge you to Google and find me one more Shia terror group.
Do you
You
want me to
can't do
actually
it.
try and Google it now?
Yes.
Let me see
You
what I
won't
can find out. Probably nothing.
Hamas, Al-Qaeda, Al-Shabaab, Boko Haram, ISIS, Chechen rebels, the Bosnian Muslims, all Sunni Islamic terrorists. All of them. Every terrorist group that you ever know of, Sunni Islamic, except for Hezbollah and the Houthi rebels. The Houthi rebels aren't really terrorists.
Well, so far, I can't say that I'm really finding much when I type that in, Shiite terrorist groups, and I'm not finding much. In fact, actually, I would say this article is maybe even backing what you're saying. It's saying Sunni and Shiite terrorism, the difference that matters. Now, I haven't actually read through it, but yeah, I assume that is probably going about to tell me the same thing that you just said, is that there's a big difference between the Shia and the Sunnis, and that the Sunnis are really the ones committing much of these terrorist acts, eh?
Yeah. All these people who are trying to push Sharia and all this will be Sunni Muslims. So there is a big distinction there, that who is the real problem. And Iran does not fund terror. It does not have enough money to fund terror like Saudi Arabia or Qatar do. Right? And who are the foot soldiers? The Pakistanis. Who are killing the soldiers on the boots of the ground in the Afghanistan war? The Pakistanis. The Pakistanis take Canadian money, the US money, the Western world's money, and then they go to the terrorists and say, okay, their base is over there, go attack. That's basically, I'm not even simplifying it. That's exactly what is happening.
Damn, man. I like it. You know what, Arjun? I love having you on because you always teach me a lot about this stuff. Because I never heard of this.
Yeah. Dude, this is exactly what is happening. So, and you will go, I have Googled for days and days and days. I could not find another Shia terror group other than Hezbollah and the Houthi rebels. The Houthi rebels aren't really terrorists. They're just a militia. They're like more like freedom fighters. They have some terror problem, but apart from Hezbollah, I could not find a real terror organization with any impact or any presence anywhere. Because they are such a small minority that they don't have time for terror. They are just too busy proving how good a Muslim they are. Oh. And the actual guys fighting terror are who? Saudi Arabia, the Saudi royal family. I read this amazing article where I heard where it's written, a Saudi prince, went and joined ISIS. He ran away from it. Yeah, he had earlier joined Al-Qaeda. He ran away from home, joined Al-Qaeda, came back, then ran away again, and then joined ISIS.
Jesus Christ. I mean, these Saudi princes are allowed to get away with anything. I mean, we see how they act when they're in other countries, and it's disgusting. And now they're allowed to go fight for terrorist organizations, and nothing's done about it?
And no, you know what is more dangerous than that? Right? These Saudi princes and whatever, emirs and sheikhs, they own vast swaths of Western media and infrastructure. They own majority or near majority companies like CNN. They own huge amount of percentages in all these groups. Right? and I'm sure I've not done the research on Canadian media, but I'm sure they will be owning a significant amount of interest in these in Canadian broadcasting.
I'm going to look into that because if they ever hold a lot of stock in American news, I wouldn't be surprised they hold a lot of stock in Canadian news. And I know at least before I've done a traceback where I saw how many companies owned how many news sources. So I already have the research started. So I think I might go back and see if I can actually trace back a little farther and see if there's any origins in the Saudi Arabian royal family that have bought up Canadian media recently, because that would be very interesting to know. The other thing is, too, is if that's the case, I'd like to go back and read some of these articles and see how they present a few situations, maybe concerning ISIS or some events that go on in the Middle East. So that would be very interesting. I think I'm going to go back and do some research on that because that seems like it's very significant.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, what I was going to say was, see, one thing that from at least India's side we see is that Iran is the wrong target. Okay. Pakistan has 200 nukes pointed at Israel, pointed at India, pointed at China, pointed at Africa, pointed at the Western world. Pakistan has 200 nukes. Iran doesn't even have a catapult.
I think maybe part of the reason that people put so much emphasis on Iran had to do with that, the nuclear deal that was going on a few years ago. I think that may have been one of the significant reasons people put a lot of emphasis on Iran.
Yeah, there was this ex-CIA guy called Bruce Ryder. Yeah, he is the most senior guy in Washington who sets the security policies for USA regarding the Southeast Asian region. I had seen one talk of his where he was addressing this, I think he was speaking at a think tank or something, or one of those policy research institutes, where he says, and I was flabbergasted, like he's an intelligent guy, he's not a dumb guy, and he said, we don't know what to do with Pakistan. We don't know how to deal with them. They're taking our money and then going and telling the terrorists where our bases are and where our soldiers are or where our operations are happening. So many Canadian soldiers must have died because of these things. I'm just extrapolating because if it has happened to the US, Canada was a boots on the ground partner with the US. So was England, so was Sweden, so was any number of these Western countries. You have lost soldiers. You have lost soldiers because of this.
That aggravates me even more because, like, I understand the soldiers make a decision to go in the military and it's a risky job, but putting them in unnecessary dangerous situation always pisses me off because, like, I guess I'm going a little off topic, but even if we're talking about the mission that Canada's getting involved, the peacekeeping mission in Mali, I don't like that for the same reason. We're putting a lot, like 200 of our Canadian Forces members in unnecessary danger. And now if you're telling me that we may have just had a leak from the inside that has gotten these Canadians killed, and other soldiers around the world, then that is something that needs to be addressed immediately by our intelligence agencies. These people need to be exposed and they need to be brought down immediately before more are killed.
Yes. And I'll tell you one more thing about Syria. Okay, Syria has been painted at this garden. I'm no advocate for Syria, but I'll tell you about the Syrian situation. What we know over here, the Western world has painted Syria as this oppressor of its people, using of chemical weapons and all these things. Right? I'll tell you something about Syria. How did the Syrian conflict start? The Syrian conflict did not start with the Middle Eastern countries taking a stand against Syria for oppressing its people. That's not how the Syrian conflict had started. That is the original reason given, that the Syrian army is attacking its own people. That was the original reason, but that's not true. The original reason was Bashar al-Assad was approached by the Saudis to put an oil pipeline through Syria. Bashar al-Assad refused. Bashar al-Assad, interestingly, is a Shia Muslim. He's a Shia Muslim guy ruling over a Sunni majority country. Right? Just like Iraq was a Sunni Muslim guy. That guy, what's his name?
Saddam Hussein?
Saddam Hussein, he was a Sunni Muslim guy ruling over a Shia majority country. Iraq is a Shia majority country. So, Syria, similarly, He's a Shia minority guy. He's ruling. And he's not even ruling. He's a president. He's a democratically elected president. Okay, he's not a dictator, which people would feed you normally, because there have been many independent Western journalists who have gone to Syria on the ground and done the research. One of them was a Canadian woman journalist, Canadian lady journalist, who went on behalf of the UN, and she gave a briefing at the UN where she says that I was on the ground and I'm seeing that these Syrian guys, the Syrian army guys are protecting the people from attacks from the rebels. The rebels are supported by ISIS and Saudi Arabia, right? Rebels are supported by ISIS and Saudi Arabia, and they have been armed by US, because everybody wants an oil pipeline going through them. Okay, Indian journalists went to Syria and they went on the ground. The Syrian citizens actually love the Syrian army because they have protected them so much, and they have the army uniforms and flags out of respect for the army, because it is the Syrian army who protects them. And the chemical weapons thing, that was some abandoned godown which was attacked by the Syrian rebels.
But they were presenting as if it was coming from Bashar al-Assad. I remember that, yeah.
Syrians did not have any chemical weapons.
Didn't the UN do a search in there like somewhere in like the mid-2000s and they didn't find any chemical weapons? Because I remember that coming up. Like the UN had previously gone looking for chemical weapons in Syria but didn't find any.
Yeah, there weren't any. The thing was that there was some chemicals stored in some factory, and those chemicals were abandoned factory was attacked by rebels, and there was a leak, and that the chemical had aerosolized because of the explosion, and there was a leak and it affected the people, and that was presented as a sort of chemical weapons attack. But see, now everybody has a partisan interest in that. Not that I am an advocate for Syria. This is the information that we are getting in India.
Well,
right? Because Indian news channels went to Syria and they rectified all these things. And they reported back saying, yeah, the situation is completely different. Bashar al-Assad, in fact, came on an Indian TV channel, an Indian news channel, and he gave an hour-long interview, I think, or a 45-minute long interview, saying that this is actually what is going on. We have approached the West, we have approached these Islamic countries many, many times. Nobody's listening to us. Bashar al-Assad is saying this. Bashar al-Assad has been democratically elected. He has been, so the Arabs are doing a lot of funny business in the Middle East. Okay, and a lot of obfuscation has to be sort of cut through, because the real situation is something else. You cannot focus on Iran when your main problem is Pakistan. A Pakistani scientist who was working in the Netherlands copied and stole a whole bunch of Western technology on chemical and biological weapons from a pharmaceutical company, and he proliferated and smuggled it into Pakistan. And today he has, I think the company's name was Apotex or something. He has started a rival in the garb of a pharmaceutical company. He has probably, this is a guess, this is an estimate made by security agencies, that they have started a bioweapons production facility in the garb of a pharmaceutical facility. So,
did you say Apotex?
Or something like that, yeah.
Because about a year ago, our prime minister got into a problem with that. He was like, I can't remember the exact problem, but yeah, he was like I think Apotex was funding, if I remember correctly, he had like those dinners where like people come, you can meet the liberals, and then they charge you like $1,500 a plate in order to be there. And usually there are ways to lobby the government unofficially. And Justin Trudeau got in trouble with that because that's exactly what happened. Apotex was like funding him one of these meals of his, and where people could go and lobby him. So when you brought up Apotex on that, and you also mentioned that the West is not listening to you, I can't help but feel there's a connection there. At least from Canada's perspective, if Justin Trudeau has this sort of connection with Apotex, that I could completely see why he'd be ignoring this information.
So Apotex had a bunch of technology stolen from them by the Pakistanis to start, probably start a chemical weapons or a bioweapons thing, right? And Trudeau having connections to the Aga Khan, that's another person who should be looked upon with some degree of caution, because his granddad, as I said, was the guy who came up with, very educated and very wealthy, by the way, his granddad, that he came up with the two-nation theory. So these guys are hardliners, right? Pakistan, who has 200 nuclear weapons, and most of it tactical nuclear weapons, right? You know what tactical nuclear weapons are, right?
Those are, no, I can't actually say exactly. I just thought maybe they'd be better for long-range engagement.
Oh, tactical nuclear weapons are small nuclear weapons which have a range of 20 to 50 miles.
Oh, lovely. Even smaller nukes now, then, is what you're saying, that have, like, just as big of a blast range?
No. Equivalent to their strength, right? If you have a 10 kiloton weapon at going 50 miles, it will have a huge blast. It means some of them must be equivalent to, at least equivalent to Hiroshima and Nagasaki, if not more. So tactical nuclear weapons means what? You're willing to hit your own people.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
Oh, shit, you're right, yeah.
And you know why they came up with this tactical nuclear weapons thing? This is apart from the fact that they have intercontinental ballistic missiles which have a range of over 3,000 miles. This is on top of that. They said that if the Indian forces, if the Indian armored columns break into Pakistani territory and overrun our forces, we will use tactical nuclear weapons. So they will take out our soldiers, fine. You will also take out surrounding villages and people. You will take out your own troops trapped there. So that's tactical nuclear weapons. And they're cranking them out like sausages every day. They have the Pakistani defense minister, or one Pakistani minister had once said, and one along with one general, they had once said that we will eat grass, but we will keep making nuclear weapons.
Wow. So they're like hard set on war, essentially, if anything goes to go happen. They're hard set on making sure that as many people are killed as possible.
Yeah. So this is a big problem. So tactical nuclear weapons, where imagine how insane you have to be willing to hit your own people.
Honestly, when we think about that, the only other group I can think that was willing to hit its own people or use its own people as human shields in that way was Hamas and Hezbollah. Yeah.
Oh, ISIS.
Yeah, exactly. All these extreme Muslim, like all these extreme Muslim terrorist groups, really. And again, like you said, they're pretty much Sunni Muslims.
Yeah. So see, not only that, see, they are willing to hit their own people. They are willing to have their people starve so that they can keep making nuclear weapons. And they have got, I don't know how many, but the last estimate was at 200.
Jesus Christ.
Which is insane to even begin to think on those lines. Nobody, or no country on earth who has nuclear weapons, whether it be India, whether it be US, whether it be Britain, whether it be France, whether it be Russia, nobody has tactical nuclear weapons because nobody wants to launch nukes on their own people. They will not launch nukes even if one of their people are in the blast zone.
So So it seems that, like, yeah, so Iran has been painted as the main enemy, but even as you're saying, we have to shift our focus to Pakistan and Saudi Arabia. And I completely agree with Saudi Arabia. I've always said that they have been one of the biggest funding of terrorism. Although I wonder, though, with how many people, like how many of our countries are allied with Saudi Arabia and how much oil we bought off them, do you think that'll ever happen, that we'll actually focus in on them as a problem and start like trying to deal with them?
See, the thing about the oil bit is that you see now the fact that USA has started producing its own oil because of their own huge oil reserves. Saudi Arabia's oil prices have gone down. It is projected that their foreign exchange reserves will finish in another 5 years.
Really?
If yeah, that's how bad it is. They have that. Why do you think the Prince Salman, their current prince, is working overtime to sort of trying to sort of revamp Saudi Arabia's image and infrastructure? Because of this, because the oil prices have fallen, right? And not only that, terrorism has just wiped out a lot of their resources. All these sheikhs have been spending vast quantities of money funding NGOs, funding Linda Sarsour type activists, and all these soft Islamist guys, and sending money to other countries to build mosques and all, Salafi and Wahhabi mosques, to sort of they're running out of money. How long will your billions last if you keep spending them like hundreds of millions at a time?
Well, I can only feel that when that happens, that the situation in the Middle East is only going to get much worse, because once the oil is pretty much worthless or gone, they're going to have nothing there to really prop themselves up. So I could just see it as turning into even more of a violent place and a shit show than it is now.
No, one last point about that. I had this great, like, I was told this by an uncle of mine who's into politics. This great imagery it has, that they used to sort of they were nomadic tribes, right? They were like they were going from oasis to oasis, riding camels, living in tents. Suddenly one day they found oil and they became like sheikhs and whatnot, right? The sheikhs and princes and emirs. The day the oil finishes, he told me, overnight they will go back to riding camels and living in tents. Overnight. From living in penthouses now and riding Maseratis, they overnight go on to living in tents and riding camels. And the worst part about it is they have not skilled themselves or educated themselves or made themselves capable enough to even now ride camels and live in tents, because they have forgotten how to do that also. So imagine how much of a shit show it will be actually.
Oh boy, the Middle East is in for a hard time in the next 10 years or so if this is the case. And again, yeah, if they're not educating themselves and the illiteracy is so low, then really I don't know how they're going to survive on their own. We're just reaching up the 2.5 hour mark. So I was curious, did you have any more final points before we signed off?
Yeah. Final point is, see, the talk about Islam is not a question of we should shame them into submitting. That's not going to happen. The discussion about Islam should be in conjunction with moderate Muslims, because they are the ones who truly know how the extent of which these people, the lengths to which these people will go, and what they're actually trying to do, and have been trying to do for a long time, decades in Western society, and how much damage they have caused the moderate Muslims. So they have to be engaged. RCMP, CSIS have to partner up with moderate Muslim communities and to fight this soft Islam, to fight the hard terror. And you have to find the right allies in the world. In the Middle East, apart from Israel, your right ally is not Saudi Arabia. I'm not saying Iran is either, but the fact of the matter is, in the absence of allies, you should be very cautious about who you are dealing with. And the main problem of the Western world, the Mecca mosque was attacked by a Pakistani. The Orlando shooting was done by a Pakistani. The bunch of these terror attacks in France and Germany done by Pakistanis, and some of them by Afghanis, but mostly by Pakistanis. Canada, all these people. I don't know about terror attacks in Canada, but if you look, many of them just might be Pakistani. The Mecca mosque, Shia mosque near Mecca was attacked by a Pakistani. Okay, all the terror attacks happening in India definitely are from Pakistan, right? Your main terrorism problem is in Pakistan, not not in Iran, not in the Middle East. It's in Pakistan.
So we need to make sure that we're focusing our attention on Pakistan in order to at least start to solve the problems that we're having right now.
And partner with the correct allies, the ones who are interested in fighting this with you, who are from amongst them.
Well, I hope that Canada and India can stay to be strong allies in this fight together, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. We are the ones who are leading the charge on trying to form a counter-terror sort of coalition.
Alrighty, then let's keep up the pressure, my friend. Arjun, it's always great to have you on the show, and honestly, man, you're invited on anytime. I just want you to know that.
I'm a fan of the show. I have learned so much from watching your videos. I am a fan of the show. So for me to be on the show, it's a great thrill for me.
Awesome, Arjun. Well, don't worry. We'll be having you back on again soon. And if ever I'm having a group stream, feel free to jump in anytime. Just send me a message and I'll shoot you the link.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on.
Anytime, Arjun.
Pleasure talking to you.
It's always great talking to you, my friend. You have a good one, all right?
You too. Thanks. Good night.
Good night.